Hmm?
We have our tables.
Yeah,
We have a table because it's kind of.
you have a table. I would. Do you want? Oh, just one second. Okay. So I'll do like. Hi, everyone. Thank you for choosing to join this session. Very glad that you came to listen and hear what the OTAs have to say about mainstreaming, sustainability, sustainable tourism, and sustainable products. So just to clarify that an online travel agency is a web-based marketplace that allows consumers to search and book travel products and services, including hotels, flights, tours, activities, and more. And let's check how many of us actually have been using an OTA for coming here or during this trip if you're going afterwards somewhere else. So you will see on Slido that there is a poll. Have any of you used an OTA in your current trip? A train, bus, maybe accommodation, if you haven't used the link that we provided? Tiffany, can you change to see the numbers there? 17 people replied, 18. How many do we have here? Well, we can definitely say that all of us, travel professionals, are using OTAs, right? And today, in the previous session, we were talking, Randy and the rest of the panel were talking about how influencing supply chain can be done when the organization is actually contracting different companies to provide the tour product. However, here we're actually discussing the distribution. So the OTAs that we will have today, they don't actually, it's a marketplace, as I said at the beginning. They actually provide an open place for those products to be there. So their possibility to influence is a little bit different. They perhaps cannot do this preferred contracting like we've heard from Royal Caribbean Group, but they can do other things to provide better visibility to the customers, the users, on how to identify those sustainable accommodations. There's also a question on how you identify what an accommodation is considered sustainable. And I think that GSTC, we've been working with quite a lot of OTAs over the past few years in a program that we call Market Access. We work with prominent OTAs like Booking.com, Agoda, Google Travel, Traveloka, Make My Trip, and others all across the world. And what we do is we work with them to both discuss on how to communicate it in a proper manner, that there is no greenwashing or miscommunication that has some perhaps implications of liabilities. And another thing, of course, is that we also work with them to provide them a list of those sustainable accommodations that we consider sustainable, which is comprised of two groups. the group of those hotels that are certified by accredited certification bodies, and another group at the moment, which will likely, perhaps in the near future, will be phased out, but at the moment we're still working together with those standard owners that own GSTC recognized standards and verify to a certain degree if accommodations are sustainable or not. So for today, we will hear on the potential and the impact that the OTAs have, because they can do two things. They both speak with the businesses, right? With the hotels. We'll hear, if you don't mind, share a little bit in your presentation how many properties are in general, how many properties are on your platforms. You'll hear huge numbers, or perhaps a little bit smaller numbers when we're talking about a niche market or a niche segment. So they work with the providers of accommodation, but yet they're also communicating with consumers, with travelers or other type of consumers and buyers. So they have actually these 2 points of how they can influence, and that would be very interesting to hear. At least that's what I'm waiting, and I'm looking forward to learn from you. Although the 3 speakers represent accommodation OTAs, they are actually quite different in their offering specific clients, B2B, and more. And with us today, I would like to call on stage Elena Pérez Cabello from Hotelbeds, Catherine Gilvarry from Hostelworld, and Kees Boonen from Booking.com. And first, let me call Elena to speak. Elena Pérez Cabello is the Chief Human Resources Officer of Hotelbeds Group. She joined Hotelbeds in 2015, and she has designed and led the transformation of the company's HR, internal communication, and the ESG programs. She has a strong international experience gained in consulting from firms including PwC, IBM, and has also held HR positions in Claire Accessories and Tendon Group. Elena.
Hello, thank you. So I think I need... yeah. So hello everyone, I'm super happy to be here for many reasons, because I'm here with my colleagues. It's an opportunity to network with GSTC that, as you will see, has been crucial for the program that I'm going to introduce to you today, because Seville is my city. So I haven't been living here for 20 years, but it's my hometown, so it's double privilege to be here. So before we start presenting the program that I'm going to share with you today, I thought it would be good to share with you a little bit about Hotelbeds, because we are not an OTA, right? So probably for you, we are less familiar than the organizations of my colleagues, because we are not facing the end consumer, the traveler. So we are a tech travel company. We have a strong tech soul, and what we do is we provide tech solutions to the ecosystem of travel, and our purpose is to connect and empower organizations in the travel ecosystem to make sure that we make their life easier. How does this happen? So I think just to try to explain it in a graphic way, on one side we have accommodation providers. We have more than 300,000 properties in our systems. We have more than 18,000 experiences and activities, more than 500 car rental companies, transfers that cover the whole globe, and along, etc. So what we do for these companies is we provide them distribution capabilities in a complex B2B world. And also we enable them with the strategic capabilities more and more, like payments or data that are capabilities that they cannot access easily or they don't have themselves. And in the center we have strong, as I've said, tech capabilities, and through our platforms we build the bridges with the other side that are a base of more than 70,000 clients that are including OTAs, TAs, tour operators, airlines, and along, etc. So we are in the center of this ecosystem of companies, and we partners with all of them. And I think this is crucial to understand the program that I'm going to introduce you now. ESG for us is an integral part of our strategy. We have recently launched our new ESG plan and strategy for the next 4 years. It's part of our 4-year plan. We have a new CEO that came less than 2 years ago that is really committed, and the executive committee is really committed. We are committed to make this a reality and to make a real impact to make tourism a force for good. So this privileged position has taken us to think how we could use our value chain to support the acceleration of sustainability in the sector. So what we did a few years ago is to think how we can take advantage of that position to support our partners to achieve their sustainability goals and to contribute ourselves through a value chain. Do whatever we do best, what we do best, that is being a bridge and join forces. So we decided to join forces with our partners, and we create a program called GREEN program that tries to build bridges between the two sides to give visibility to sustainable properties, to sustainable choices, ultimately for the end traveler. And what we have done is to connect on one side the sustainable properties, because we have started with accommodation and it was easier at the time. And connect those properties and give them privileged visibility in our systems, in our platforms, and support them to get to the end consumer through our clients. So the benefits of this program, of what our partners get from it, is the first benefit is that they get labeled as green in our systems. So this is the first thing that we do. And this label is also displaying what kind of certification they've got. And I will talk about certifications in a minute. The second thing that we do is we train our teams, our commercial teams. We have a commercial team facing hotels in this case, and chains, and a commercial team facing our clients, and we train them both to talk confidently about the program, to make sure that they are talking about sustainability in a proper way, and they are able to push this product through our value chain and make it more visible. And the third thing that we do is specific marketing campaigns, and very constant marketing campaigns that we call green waves, in our platforms, to make sure that this product is getting enhanced, privileged visibility in our platforms. That, as you can see, as you can imagine, it has a multiplier effect because we are accessing these more than 70,000 companies in the travel ecosystem. So this is the essence of the program. When it came to certifications and how we were going to be rigorous about the program, we decided that the best way to go about it, to be rigorous, and because of the completeness of the criteria, was to go with GSTC. We're GSTC members, and we decided that we were going to give visibility to properties that have been certified by an accredited body by GSTC. So this has built ahead of the program that is more than 8,000 properties that are GSTC certified. And we have added recently a handful big hotel chains that we know for sure, because we collaborate very strongly with them when it comes to ESG. They have frameworks or programs that are as rigorous and as demanding as GSTC certifications. That's why, as you will see in the next slide, that the base has grown up to more than 35,000 properties classified as green. So green, because we follow the GSTC criteria, green is not only environmental, but it's also social, cultural, and management. That is what I like about the GSTC criteria. So the impact is being really rewarding for us. The first thing is, we have brought to this green program almost 38,000 properties. The impact, and this is I think is a very nice data point for this audience, the impact of these green waves are being exceptional. So the conversion rate of these green campaigns is around 12.7%. That means that when we push this product through our platforms, through our technology platforms, the conversion rates, the cost of consumers buying this product goes really high. For those that are not familiar with marketing campaigns, a successful marketing campaigns would be between a 3% conversion rate and a 6% conversion rate. So this data is exceptionally, I mean, this conversion rate is exceptionally high. I think that demonstrates that there is a real interest, and what we are trying to do now is to use the data that we have, because as we interconnect with all those players in the travel industry, we have a lot of data we can use to influence properties, to understand that it's really worth to get certified, that it's really worth to invest in sustainability and to become sustainable. And on the client side, there is a lot of excitement because they are able to contribute as well. We are solving the request or the demand of the end consumer to buy sustainable choices, and that has generated a lot of engagement with the program as well. We have recently expanded a little bit the program to create 2 new attributes in the system. One is single-use plastic-free, and the other one is electric chargers, because those are initiatives that some of these hotel chains that we collaborate strongly with are putting forward, and we thought that it was a good way to expand the program. But the program is not going to finalize here. We have plans, and this is all work in progress, but the idea, and we've been talking about activities this morning and tours and experiences, we would like to expand the program to this side, to tours and to activities and experiences in the future, as long as I get these certifications that we are talking about. Automation and data, I think one of our challenges really is to sustain the program itself, because each year we need to make sure the certifications are still valid, and we have to go hotel by hotel and property by property, understanding if they have kept their certifications and they're up to date. So we want to automate that. We want to use data, as I've said before. The big data that we handle is huge, so if we can use this data to put it at the service of the industry, to contribute to sustainability, to understand what are the trends and the patterns of the end consumers, because this is what we are getting through, I mean, these conversion rates, etc., this understanding, that's what we would like to do. And then why not to push the visibility of sustainable destinations in the future, because we have strong relationships with a lot of tourism boards across the globe, so why not try to support those that are really betting on and making an effort to be sustainable. So we remain at your disposal for anything that has to do with this program and other sustainability initiatives, because we want to really make an impact and contribute as much as we can, so we're here to support and collaborate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elena. And now just to call Catherine Gilvarry, Head of Supply at Hostelworld, one of the company's earliest joiners. Catherine has held multiple roles on both the marketing and the supply side of the business over the years. She sits on Hostelworld's steering committee for ESG and leads the development of bespoke sustainability framework for hostels partners that will be launched next year, and we'll hear more about it now. Catherine.
Thanks, Roy. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Roy, for the introduction and for helping me escape December in Dublin to come to beautiful Sevilla. It was an easy decision. So I'm going to go on the assumption that some of you might have heard of Hostelworld, but maybe perhaps some of you have not. So with that in mind, really quick introduction. We were founded in Dublin in 1999. So in the OTA landscape, we've actually been around for quite some time. We are an online marketplace for hostels, and by hostels we mean an accommodation type that has shared communal spaces. We have 16,000 properties in 170 countries, so we're very global, and we also obviously book customers from all of these marketplaces too. The next two statistics are very specific to the sector. So almost 80% of our customers are young, feeling younger and younger to me these days, aged between 18 and 35, and a very similar amount book shared accommodation. So yesterday we saw tons of stats of where we hope to get to and what people say they'll do, but what they actually do is quite different. This is actually based on our bookings. About 20 million bed nights, 80% of those were into shared accommodation, and shared in that instance means a room with 3 or more capacity. And we have 14.1 million reviews as of the end of October, so our audience are also very engaged with providing feedback, which is obviously going to be extremely important as we move into establishing the framework. So again, a statistic some of you are probably aware of, but right now the millennial Gen Z population is the largest population cohort on the planet, 4.9 billion. And even more important for all of us is that 1 in 4 of these are planning to travel in the next 6 months. So it is a sector that's fueling travel growth right across the board. On the more positive side then, on the right, is the fact that such a large proportion of them are making decisions, conscious decisions to travel more sustainably and consider sustainability when they're booking. And almost 60% are already choosing to use bus and rail rather than air when they choose to travel. And there's really great initiatives for this millennial Gen Z cohort, like the Eurail free passes that they distribute to young travellers to encourage them to use rail. You know, try it out, see what it's like, and hopefully move them to that form of transportation. And for us, and our responsibility in this is the fact that they consider hostels to be the most sustainable travel option. So 80% are already considering the shared spaces in hostels to be the more sustainable accommodation type, and 50% look at things like the reduced water and electricity usage in hostels as a decision driver when they're choosing to book accommodation. 70% of our customers, so we ran a survey earlier this year. We had about 6,000 respondents. It was our highest ever response rate to a survey, and 70% cite climate change as their #1 concern. So when it comes to booking hostels, it's quite advantageous that the CO2 output of a hostel on a per bed, per person, per night basis is about 25% that of hotel counterparts. And I'll talk a little bit about where that statistic came from in a future slide. So the hostel category is unique in the accommodation landscape for a whole host of reasons. So on the left-hand side, I looked at the supply piece specifically. So hostels provide both dorm and private rooms, and that's still an unknown to a lot of people. It's not just gigantic dormitory accommodation. That still exists, but it kind of goes all the way from a private single room all the way up to these larger dorms. But more broadly, beyond the accommodation is the communal spaces like the common rooms. There's shared kitchen facilities, now co-working more and more. So it's beyond the actual sleeping accommodation. It's a low cost point, so we benchmarked against 2-star hotels, which we deemed the closest comparator, so it's about 25% of the cost there. Whilst there has been some consolidation and there are large chains like the Selena's popping up, it still remains fragmented and independently owned. So anything from, you know, a husband and wife operation in a jungle in South America all the way up to the large hostels. So that's just something to be considered as we talk about what we're going to work on in the future. And then they're largely located in the local community. They employ from the local community, they give back, hire local artists. They typically upcycle old buildings as well. So there's a lot of different things that they do, which moves us into the sustainability side. I'll talk about the CO2 piece again. Lower water consumption, so much less laundry requirements, shared bathrooms, all of that. Lower food production. The shared kitchen, you know, is a key part of that shared facilities, as I said. And also less packaging due to lower bedding, lower toiletries provided, all of that. So we know that we have a role for hostels, because if you think back to that fragmentation, the low cost point, it is a challenging scenario that they find themselves in when it comes to tackling all of this. So when we surveyed our hostels, we know that 56% are already working on sustainable initiatives, and a further 37% want to, but they need help. So they cited financial constraints as their primary blocker to success. So again, evident in the data on the previous slide. And they're least developed in gaining any kind of recognition or measurement. So, you know, there's a wealth of opportunity there to bring them on this journey. And 60% favour a badging system, which is not unusual. It's what's common across all the OTAs at the moment. So what we've done so far is to commission the research that generated that 25% carbon or CO2 emissions. So we worked with Bureau Veritas on that report. That took a subset of hotel data that was available in the public sector, benchmarked it against the outputs of a cohort of our partner properties, and as I said, came in at 25% of the emissions of their hotel. The hotels that we benchmarked against. That's something we want to continue to build on. You know, to showcase the inherent benefits that are already existing in the hostel sector. We've also added categories to our customer awards. So there are reviews that customers who have already stayed in the property, very legitimate reviews. So added some eco, community impact categories to that. And we also were the first OTA to sign with the GTPI, so the Global Tourism and Plastics Initiative, aimed at addressing root causes of plastic pollution. So we've been promoting that for about 3 years now. So to what we're doing now and to what we plan to do, we have coined a staircase to sustainability moniker, which I believe came from Randy initially. It felt quite fitting. Most of our hostels don't have elevators, so we feel that the staircase analogy will work well for them. But it's more to kind of start their journey, start to bring to the surface all of the things that they're doing, raise awareness amongst the hostel community that they are doing really good things, and take away that fear and trepidation about even embarking on this journey with small teams and small budgets. So we have worked very closely, obviously, with GSTC to adapt the standards to the independent hostel sector. That means developing a bespoke management system, measurement system. We're working in conjunction with Bureau Veritas to produce that. And then, obviously, once that framework is out there, we want to start showcasing and highlighting the efforts that the hostels are making on the front end. So that's all has been worked on for the last 12 months and hopefully launching early next year. So to close, we, and Roy kind of opened the session, we have a lot of stakeholders and we have to bring all of them on this, and that's the challenge. So we as a business, then we need to work with our partners, and we can, build anything, but getting buy-in is what's going to challenge us. So from a hostel point of view, we see a really unique opportunity to harness those benefits that I've already talked about, so those inherent benefits of hostels. We're obviously going to provide the framework to address all of the obstacles that they perceive to be in their way at the moment around cost, resourcing, and time. And then the peer-to-peer power of the hostel community is exceptional. So yes, they're in competition with each other, but they also very much work together. It is a niche sector, so that power in numbers is extremely important. So we really want to use that peer-to-peer power to educate and inspire. And I know educate has been mentioned a million times. We as a business have a fairly lofty educational role to play in all of this too. And I'm not oblivious to the fact that there will be a lot of hand-holding and walking and talking them through that, and we're 100% on board for that. Then from the customer's point of view, we obviously want to showcase the efforts to enable them to make the sustainable choices. We want to use our own internal social network capabilities to surface sustainable activities that are happening at hostels to get customers to join them. And we want to capture consumer feedback and start to use that to inform the hostels as to how to progress. That's trickier, and I'm running out of time, but that customer piece is extremely challenging in that, we're across every market where there's different rules, regulations, requirements. What a customer sees might not tie up in their brain with what they're expecting to see, but it might be what's happening in that particular market. So figuring all of that out. And then for us, we obviously want to continue to promote hostels as the most sustainable choice. And contrary to Matt's remarks, and I didn't have time to edit my slide, collaboration is the only way that we're going to make this work. We've already reached out to a number of other OTAs and other players. They've been instrumental in helping us kind of jump over hurdles that weren't actually hurdles, but we thought they were until we spoke to others that are doing this. So that's mission critical for us, that cross-industry collaboration. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And let me introduce Kees Boonen, the Senior Manager of the Travel Sustainable Program at Booking.com. Kees is with Booking.com since 2018, and earlier this year joined the sustainability team. Before, he actually led the public affairs effort in Asia Pacific from the Booking.com headquarters in Singapore. And prior to Booking.com, Kees worked with FTI Consulting and in Brussels advising multinational corporations from various sectors on EU engagements. Kees.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. Can you all hear me? Thanks for having us and for the invitation to speak here. Very happy to be a GSTC member. Maybe to address one of the most things talked about right at the start is that our Travel Sustainable program is not a certification, and nor do we aspire to be. We're not in competition. What we really want to do is provide accommodations a pathway that are just starting their sustainability journey all the way up to becoming certified if they wish to do so. Our mission is really to make it easier for travelers to make more sustainable choices. And we're doing that by having developed a universal, transparent, and credible recognition for accommodations to share sustainability information. I think you've all seen those numbers, and it doesn't matter if it comes from Booking.com of other places, and Randy already mentioned this earlier, is that what we see clearly is that both consumers and accommodations, sustainability is very much on top of their mind. However, if we dig a little bit deeper on the consumer side, then we ask, hey, do you understand what sustainable travel is? If you would like to travel more sustainable, do you believe you have the opportunity to do so? There often, the answer is no. We see a very significant number of consumers that do not know how to travel in a more sustainable way. That's actually the same mechanism for partners, is that sustainability is top of mind. I think the number is around 80% that says sustainability is important for us in our business operations. However, if you then ask, do you have the resources to become more sustainable? Do you have the knowledge? Then often the answer is no, they struggle with that. So really, what our program has been built up around is that how can we break down the frictions that are currently exist, both on the consumer side and on the partner side. And here you see it, often they lack the knowledge and the know and the transparency to travel in a more sustainable way, and also on the partner side. Partners want to become more sustainable, but they're not really sure about the impact it has. Sometimes they lack the incentives to do so, and the actual tools to become more sustainable. And I think that's why it's very important the work that GSTC is doing, the DMOs are doing, the accredited GSTC bodies as well, is that it's very important to put a structure and pathway for partners how to become more sustainable. Because one thing I would highlight in this context, and that we hear more and more and more, is that partners actually become more hesitant to share their sustainability efforts. They lack the confidence. They're not sure whether it actually meets the consumer expectations. They have fear of sounding, too patronizing. Everybody's going on holiday. What we sometimes see is that the moment people jump on a plane, they leave behind some of their sustainability attitudes they use at home. So again, GSTC creating standards, guidelines, it's very important to make sure that this is not happening, because a lot of accommodations do incredible stuff around sustainability, and I think it's our job to highlight to bookers. In short, this is actually the flywheel, the sustainable travel flywheel that we want to activate or accelerate. We want to increase the sustainability supply. We want to understand where partners are, where accommodations are in their journey. We want to increase the sustainability supply. So when consumers actually want to travel in a more sustainable way, they have the option to do so. And if the supply is there, more and more, we also want to encourage consumers and customers to travel in a more sustainable way. And this is important because we talked about incentives as well. I think if accommodations see a more direct correlation on the ROI and they see that there's more increasing sustainable demand, this demonstrates clearly that the efforts that they've been putting into to become more sustainable are paying off. And I think one point to mention as well is, at the moment, we are really at the right top, at least for me, to increase sustainable supply. You might have seen the press release that we've put out last month, actually, when we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, because the program was launched in November 2021. We now have 1.25 million accommodations participating in our program, and of those 1.25 million properties, 400,000 have been recognized for their sustainability efforts. So how does our travel sustainable program works? let's start here on the right side, which you see some familiar logos there, and these are the independent certifications. And the program is basically built upon that and the efforts that GSTC have made and has worked with the accredited bodies. But what we found out is that if you would only focus on the independent certifications, less than 2% of the 400,000 properties that are recognized for sustainable efforts would actually be displayed on the booking platform. So, which means that the sustainable supply that is necessary to provide the consumers with options is not there. And this was one of the key drivers to come up with our internal framework. And when we built the sustainable travel program and our internal framework, we worked very closely with the GSTC and other international recognized bodies. The program is validated by the independent advisory group by Travelist, which was mentioned by Randy yesterday. If you look at our program, we aim to focus on 5 key topics, which are energy, waste, water, protecting nature, and supporting local communities. So it's a very holistic approach. What we do, we ask Accommodations to fill out a questionnaire of 32 questions. Based on the answers, on the positive answers they give, we provide them with an internal score, and this will then be displayed to the consumer and to the booker. Well, how do we display that to the consumer? Initially, and what we've done so far, is we've recognized accommodations with a badge. So it was really a binary option. You either get a badge or not a badge. But what we found out into our conversations with a lot of different stakeholders is that we can actually specifically from the certified properties, is that they felt that the binary option, badge, no badge, was not giving a very good representation, or where some of the properties that have put in significant efforts are. So we've listened to that feedback, also in discussion with policymakers. So we're going to introduce launching levels. As you know, Booking is testing a lot, but in the coming months, you will see highly likely how this has been displayed. So if you don't see it at the moment, that's because we're still testing it. And I think this gives a way more fair way on an indication to bookers on where a property is on their sustainability journey. So 1 leaf, 2 leaf, 3 leaves, I think it's very self-explanatory. Obviously, a special shout out for the certified properties. These are really the properties that have gone above and beyond in their sustainability offering. To hurry up. I think it's also really important to show how we display this to levels. And this comes back on the journey I mentioned in my introduction. As you see, it's really displayed and introduced to levels as a journey. You have no badge, level 1, level 3, and then the end goal is, if they wish to do so for properties, to become certified. At the moment, I think it's important to highlight as well that we recognize 45 different certified bodies. So if you're part of a GSTC accredited body, you will automatically receive the badge, and you'll be displayed as a certified property. One thing that comes up a lot is verification, and this is something we take very, very, very seriously, obviously. We've been working on this a lot last year. We have a 3-line of defense, if you will. First, we made it very clear that it's part of the terms and conditions when partners sign up to the program. This sounds trivial, but I think it really displays how serious we are about sustainability, and that not living up to your terms and conditions and providing with inaccurate information might have consequences. One, the consumer journey has been mentioned quite a bit by other panelists as well. One way, but we'd like to involve the booker and the consumer more, is to get them to ask their support in verifying properties. It's not really verifying. What we want to do is to see if they can help us with when they stay at the properties, that either at their stay or after, they get a questionnaire. Hey, this property has indicated it has certain sustainability attributes. Have you seen them? Is there any yes or no? And based on that feedback, we will trigger a third-party audit as well if that reaches a certain level. next to this signaling system through the consumer feedback, we're also working on third-party audits. So when the properties come onto our program, we work with control groups and other ways. So we want to make sure that a high percentage of the properties that are part of a program are actually verified. Time is up. We're not only...
You can continue.
Yeah, is that okay? Thank you. So we not only want to tell to partners what they have to do, but also how. So we work with a lot of different stakeholders to come up with a handbook, which is 400 pages long. I appreciate it's not the most easy, accessible one, but it's something we would like to improve on a lot this year, and it's really helping and providing the education to partners to become more sustainable. Travelist was mentioned yesterday, and I really want to recognize the collaboration and the progress we've made in the last 3 years. Booking has been a founding member. A lot of other global travel brands has joined in the last couple of weeks, actually, and also maybe to challenge the collaboration part as well. I think this is it. One has to appreciate this is a pre-collaborative, pre-competition platform. But we're still working with the brands that you normally compete with. I think we have shown through this Travelers Coalition that sustainability is one of the topics that you actually can collaborate quite closely, and there's more to come in the coming months and year. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll be honest, one of the things that I like being at the GSTC is actually that we collaborate with so many organizations that otherwise might be competing with each other in the industry, and we want to be the most sustainable destination, or we want to attract more travelers here, or whatever. But actually, when we speak about sustainability, we all come together and collaborate on measurements and how to actually influence towards a positive change. So thank you all for doing that as well. I'd like just to make a comment before going into some questions that you've heard both from Elena and also from Kees, that their programs are actually not only using those that are within the GSTC framework, those accommodations that are either certified by accredited certification bodies or verified by GSTC recognized standard owners. They actually, to reach a larger scale, they also include some other filters. So internally at GSTC, we consider those as filters and how much you're actually adding to increase that. So some OTAs that we work with, they choose only to use 1 or 2 filters, the GSTC framework. Others, perhaps, like Elena mentioned, that you have a strong reference to ESG, so they increase another filter to add, and that's why the numbers that might be on Hotelbeds is a little bit larger than another OTA, another marketplace, while on Booking.com, the numbers are quite large, but it's kind of a pyramid, right, if you look at the different levels. So those that have one leaf will be more, and slowly, the more you progress, they would lessen.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. So we've got a question from Sven, from Radisson. With Booking.com and Travelist Alliance leading the way on getting the industry increasing the sustainability performance, how do you see the role of certification bodies? And I'd like to address that to you, Kees, because you're also part of the Travelist Coalition.
Yeah. If I talk from a booking perspective, we see certification bodies still as the gold standard, right? And like I said, what we try to do at Booking is to really provide that pathway. I think there's a lot of things where we can work closer on. I think our discussions that we're having at the moment is a great proof point on that. So I don't really see, again, they're in competition with each other. I think what we can work on together is how can we better understand where the partner is and what the issues they're having with becoming certified. If we better understand those barriers, I think we can even be more complementary to each other. And this can be through data sharing. This can also be through what are the most adopted attributes in which country. What are the least adopted attributes? How can we work on that? But all in all, I think what we're really trying to do in Travelist, and that's a barrier what we try to break down there, is to provide a universal recognition, because what we see, there are a lot of certifications out there. It's not always very clear to consumer what that stands for and what it means. So I think unifying the way that we collect data from partners and also how we display that, I think that is where we can really find each other.
And on Travelist, there are actually a few verticals, right? There is the accommodation part, there are OTAs that relates to the flights and so forth.
Yep.
Talking about that, I think that's quite interesting, because one of the amazing things that we can actually learn is that there's so much data flowing through your systems, right? And it's so, there's a big potential here to learn. Randy and others have already commented on the famous Booking.com sustainability report that is being now conducted over the past few years and is being usually quoted quite a lot, because it's good. We've got a lot of data for so many consumers on what their preference is. So it will be really interesting to learn more about it later in the near future, in next year and so forth. And also, Catherine, I think that your program started by actually looking at and doing a research, doing a survey, learning that before actually launching. Would you mind maybe sharing a little bit more on that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, we had to. So again, because we are working with niche accommodation providers, we had to take into consideration all of the things that make them different. And then similarly on the customer side. So the reason that we've been working tirelessly for a year is to make sure that we're building something that is fit for purpose for the sector. I know Brianda from Hosteling International is here too, and they've incorporated it into their standards. It's just when it comes to 16,000 across all of the different markets, we had to expand slightly on some parts or maybe scale back on others. So what we have built took the specific inputs from the hostels when it came to what they were already doing. I did speak a little bit about fear and trepidation, and that's genuine because they just didn't know where to start, didn't know how to tackle it. So the wording that we're using is based on words that they fed back to us. So it's a very tailored program, but built in hard evidence that we got from the hostels, and then obviously worked with Bureau Veritas as well. And we reached out to the broad set of hostels, but then when it came to refining, we worked with chains, independents, different geographies, all of that. So it is very much built for purpose for them, because the goal is to make them realize what they're doing is, that they're doing a lot, that there's a lot they're doing they don't even realize they're doing. There's a whole host of ways to tackle it. And it will be very similar to what we saw at Booking, where there'll be different levels and tiers, because everybody's doing something, but we also want to move them along that journey as well. And, even speaking to Randy, so Randy was kind enough to present to our hostels at our conference in April of this year to get them thinking of that self-assessment piece, for example, or to get them to realize that certification it might be way off here, but there's a whole road between all of that, and to bring them on that road. So, yeah, very ground in facts.
Thank you. And Elena, you mentioned before that as part of it, your commercial team actually speaks about the program, and you have also actually marketing campaign around that. Do you have some feedback from the users of Hotelbeds on that aspect?
Yes, I think what I said is this, the teams, what they do is they try to push the visibility of these properties and to engage customers with those properties that are sustainable properties. On the customer side, what we've seen is that those marketing campaigns that are being so successful are demonstrating that it's really worth to and push the visibility of those sustainable choices. So that 12.7% is a huge number. So we want to go deeper into that data and to use the data to say, look, on one side, it's really successful, so you need to keep offering these sustainable choices to your end consumers, and on the other side, to convince hotels that it's really worth to invest in sustainability and to make sure that you start the journey and to get to the certification, because the conversion is there. So this has been, these are the most successful marketing campaigns in our business. So, it doesn't matter what other campaigns we do, these green waves are the most successful campaigns we have ever done. So that's a great data point for us.
Very interesting. let's go and take a few questions here. There's this person, Anonymous, who's been asking so many questions throughout the conference. Let's say, yeah, so Anonymous will probably win. Anyway, so let's take the third one that we see here to Kees, Kijan. We often see that travel, sorry, I wanted to take the question from Elena Videtic. Elena is from Switzerland Tourism, and she writes that, thank you all for your valuable input. How can you, as an OTA, influence your customers to stay longer in a destination? And I wonder, perhaps, if each one of you has a very short comment. If you don't feel like you want to comment on that, we can just go on. Let's go first, Elena.
Yeah, well, we are not an OTA, right? So for us, it's more difficult to locate the end, the traveler or the end consumer. But I guess it's the use of data at the end. What we can bring now to the table is just to understand what are the patterns or the behaviors of the travelers, and to put this at disposal of the industry to support other partners like OTAs, tour operators, to understand what is really happening, because the data that we get is coming from these 70,000, more than 70,000 organizations. So what we can do is identify those. It's difficult to start talking. So it's difficult to educate the end consumer, but data is probably what we can bring to the table, I guess.
Okay. Thank you for managing to answer a question while being tickled.
It's a good insight. I think staying longer, traveling out of travel season. I think these are two issues how we can have impact, and we definitely see there's a clear demand from the consumer side of that. So yeah, these are issues that we are keen to look into. Whether when the program further progresses.
And Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of already doing it by default, because our split is, it's almost equal between short and long stay. So the nature of our customers is that they typically go on longer trips, multiple destinations within a region or a country. We've also worked with a number of tourism boards and groups of hostels in a market to make sure that's happening. And we plan, obviously, to do a lot more of that too. So it's encouraging more of that, incentivizing longer, add additional nights in a particular property to make sure they're not moving around. Building on what's already happening naturally, I guess. And a lot of our customers are solo, so they typically travel off season anyway, because they're obviously wanting to avoid higher travel costs.
Fascinating. And this is the question to Hijan, specifically on the program of the Travel Sustainable program at Booking.com. Who determines which leaf level property is? Can you share a little bit more on that aspect?
Yeah, so when we developed the program, we worked together with Sustainalyze, which is a very recognized consultancy in the sustainability space. So in short, it's us, Booking.com, together with Sustainalyze. I want to highlight here as well is that our role, we don't see our role to bring as many sustainable properties or change the bar in that sense and put that too low. And I think the numbers that we published, that only 400,000 properties out of 1.25 million actually are recognized for their sustainability efforts, is a very strong proof point of that. So,
well, that's a thing that perhaps we can mention, that the numbers should be increased, but eventually, with all the support that you're doing, eventually it's up to the hotels, the chains, the independent owners, of course, with the franchise model that of many brands, that creates some challenge where certain general managers not necessarily need to follow sustainability procedures if they're not interested in it. There's a lot for them to do as well. So it's a collaborative approach for a lot of stakeholders, but of course, now we're speaking about what we're doing together here. And perhaps I'll take a specific question to Elena from Danny. Danny, by the way, is representing here from Get Your Guide. Get Your Guide is also a GSTC member. That's an OTA for tours and activities, European one, but has working all over. And they also have their own program. So Danny is asking, what are some of the biggest challenges to develop and switch to an automated way, a tool to track and update your database of sustainable hotels?
Well, this is a very good question. I was mentioning briefly in the presentation. So, the base has grown so much that is now difficult to maintain, right? Because we have these handful big chains that have, each one several thousand properties. That's okay because we have a very, a relationship that is very close, and we can, we collaborate with them a lot, and we know that each year we have several meetings during the year to ensure that this keeps on going. But with the ones that are GST certified, each year we need to check if this certification is still valid, is it up to date. So believe it or not, it's a manual process we need to do across the year, and that has become a challenge with more than 8,000 properties in our base. So we need to find a way to automate these to make sure, because in many things we have self-service with our partners, so they can, to put tax in their properties and select futures, etc. But with certifications, we block them, so they cannot do it unless we approve them, and they cannot renew unless we approve them. So that's the biggest challenge. I know there are solutions in the market, and we're trying to, we're a tech company, so we should find a way to automate this, but this is probably the biggest challenge that we have.
I have a question to you, Catherine. You mentioned the number of reviews. How many was it? 11. Well, it was
2.1.
Yeah, it's a lot of activity, meaning that there are your customers are very engaged. They want to tell on their what they experience. They want to share it with others. They want, actually, I believe that at least all of us have stayed at hostels. It's one of the things that you share data, share information with other fellow travelers. Do you also see reviews that are starting to be more focused on issues related to sustainability? Do you think that in the future there would be a filter, not just search by is this place quiet or is it friendly? Is it place sustainable or something like that in the reviews?
Yeah, so we started to scrape the review copy, and we are seeing more references to various initiatives that they have seen or not seen, as the case may be, in hostels. Just to kind of go back to a point I made earlier around that customer piece, there's probably an awareness body of work that we need to do as well to kind of, it's so subjective, and that's kind of our fear with all of this, and it's input we've received from hostels, because if a bin system is different in a particular hostel, they'll hear the consumers share feedback publicly in the hostel about it. So then they have to say, well, no, that's actually how it works in this market. So we will, there is a goal to incorporate a consumer feedback piece around sustainability in our broader review criteria. It's just to do it in a way that kind of helps, not hinders, to an extent. And then the other piece is around just broader categorization of hostels. So, it was mentioned earlier this morning around having an eco category or whatever we end up calling it. We launched a new initiative internally earlier in the year where consumers can now see who from Hostelworld has booked into a particular property, and we're seeing a natural categorization spill out of that. So absolutely the sustainable piece is going to spill out of that too, where consumers in chats will be able to talk about what they're seeing in a particular hostel. So it will verify what's there. So we will, but it will be carefully executed to ensure that it works in the right way for the hostel, not the wrong way. And a lot of, again, research with the hostels to figure out what that should look like too.
Kijan, maybe I see a question or two to you, but before I go and take the one from Esteban Delgado, can you perhaps explain a little bit on the different levels? If I'm a user looking now, searching for a property in a city in Europe, would there be any different location for those that have 1 leaves, 2 leaves, or certified, or how does it go in that perspective?
Yes, so I think this comes back to commercial incentives and ranking. And yeah, the program is only 1 year old. I think these are things to look at when we learn from the data and what we're seeing. So these are definitely things we will be looking at in the future, but yeah, not at the moment. We're still very much in the data collection phase, building that critical mass of sustainable supply or more sustainable supply. And I think later on, in the next step of our program, these are some of the topics we will be looking at.
And do you think that the bookers, travelers actually would pay more for sustainable choices?
We don't know, actually. It's not something we're testing. It's actually a barrier we potentially see. You saw it on the screen as well. Yeah. Because there is a perception among bookers that more sustainable supply is actually expensive. So that might mean that bookers not actually choose the sustainable option, but the non-sustainable option, because it would perceive to be cheaper. So that is something we want to dispel and dismiss. So I would actually argue it might be the opposite.
Actually, we've conducted at GSTC we conduct regular webinars for GSTC members on varied topics on related to sustainable tourism. And we had a few that deal with this question. We had tour operators in Thailand showing actually the opposite. If you become more sustainable, they showed statistics, they showed data. It's actually become the operation is cheaper. So they don't need to charge more. It's just at the beginning you might need to switch to different ingredients or whatever. So the cost might go up for a very short period of time. But if you're looking in the long run, it actually becomes much cheaper. And the same with quite a lot of hotels that we've discussed. There is a similar thing, but it's not necessarily being perceived as such.
This is an interesting point as well, because I think it was mentioned in the previous panel. If we be very honest, a lot of bookers still look at price, availability, and location, right? And what we want to do is we want to make sustainability part of that equation. And also the numbers I just shared, it shows that a lot of partners are very, very much at the beginning of their journey. So I think we have to really look at that group and how can we get them started and get them going. Just addressing the question about a cynic might say you would have devised a framework to maintain your supply. So I would disagree with that, because I think we need this transparency. We need to have and check where the industry is. I think we all want to be to be at the place of certified properties, right? Very much significant efforts into becoming more sustainable, but that's not the reality where the industry is, and that's the bridge that we try to bridge next.
And talking about price sensitivity, Catherine, the customers that are searching for hostels many times. Well, we spoke about it, that they are quite price sensitive, but yet the service that you've conducted together with Bureau Veritas and so forth, you've seen that it's actually not necessarily the case that because it's cheaper, it's less sustainable. You've showed the opposite, right?
Yeah, so many of the ways in which a hostel operates, as I said, make them inherently sustainable. What we have to do, though, however, is educate the guys that think it's cost prohibitive to be sustainable, because there's a perception that adjusting your supply chain or changing various providers for this and that will make it more expensive, when so many hostels we've talked to said quite the opposite. So when it comes to that educational piece, that's really going to play an important role, to surface case studies and examples from hostels that, okay, initially maybe a slightly increased outlay, but it returns and returns and returns, and obviously for the greater good too. So we don't see costs increasing for our customers just because hostels make more efforts in this space, and that's very reassuring and encouraging. And as I said, yeah, all of the different things that make hostels what they are actually make them more sustainable by default, which is a big plus.
And it's great that actually you share. I mean, there's quite of a collaborative approach in your platform, where you say that there's a lot of sharing of case studies, right, to other hostels on how to apply this and so forth. I've also seen it at Booking.com. You have that with a few case studies. My understanding is you're planning to do quite a lot of those in the coming year as well, right?
Yeah, as a niche OTA, you're relied on a lot by your partners, so they come to us for help and advice and guidance. So it's a privileged position. It's terrifying at times too, because there's a lot of asks and demands, but that's key to our success. We work with a lot of the associations like Costelling International. We go and talk at various events, And definitely that hand-holding piece I talked about, we're not underestimating, but we know that we need to do that. We have to do that to help them progress.
Yeah, I think that's a education. It really comes down to how can we help partners. And one of the interesting findings from our research as well, and this comes back to a panel that was yesterday on DMOs, is that when partners start their journey, the most credible information to understand how to become more sustainable are DMOs and hotel associations. So I think in that whole education piece, I think that there's really a collaboration opportunity to work closer with those parties, team up, and really provide the education that the partner group needs in that specific destination.
Very good point. And just before we end, I want to go to a separate question to Elena related to ESG. You mentioned that a lot of your customers are actually interested in that aspect. And perhaps do you have any insights on the kind of that aspect of the request for reportings compared to just looking at the GSTC framework versus or together with the reporting related to ESG in the financial world?
So I think we have a strong relationships with some of them, where we share more data, or we obviously because when it comes to sustainability, we're only giving, or in essence giving visibility to those. I think the criteria is very similar to the GSTC criteria because even if they are not certified, the ones that we are giving visibility to are using the same standards. So I think with those that we work, there is a lot of alignment in terms of their reporting criteria they are following, and we see that more and more everybody's getting that alignment to those criteria, not considering only the environmental side, but as a social, cultural impact. All the stuff is present in many of our partners. This is what we observe.
A few times I've said that if you look at the GSTC criteria and the 4 pillars, you can also look at it as ESG plus C. So E for governments is similar to the sustainable management, the first pillar. The environmental aspect is on the 4th pillar, the social aspect is in the 2nd pillar, plus C, the cultural aspect, which is important for tourism, in the 3rd one. And we're now about to close. I would just like to ask you to share each one. We'll start with Kees and go like that. How would you see things will be like in 2-3 years from now, thinking that there is no another COVID 2023? And another mayhem like that. How do you think, from that perspective of the programs that we've discussing now, how would it look like? How would travel sustainable program would be in 2-3 years from now? And the same for each one of you, if you please can share.
Good question. So if I look at our program, I think our goal for the next 2-3 years is not necessarily to grow in numbers, but really work on how can we move up the properties to become more sustainable. So work on that credibility piece. How can we introduce more attributes to cover more sustainable efforts that the properties are working on, and provide this more clearly to bookers as well, and also work on how can we make it easier for bookers to understand what is sustainability and how to book in sustainable accommodation.
Thank you.
I would like our program to be up and running as first and foremost. It's been a long year. And the other thing is, it's more from a hostel perspective, I suppose, to have hostels considered. And I'm not just doing the pitch because I'm on stage. No hostels are certified. And most governments don't consider hostels as a separate accommodation type. So we work with all of the different associations across markets to make sure that hostels have a voice at the table. Because as long as they're wrapped up in the broader accommodation sector, even if there aren't obstacles, there will be perceived obstacles. So it's to consider them for what they are and reward them accordingly too. So that's my New Year's wish.
Thank you. And Elena?
Well, I believe, it's what I've said before. I think I would love to see this program expanding to activities and experiences, to use data to convince more properties to become sustainable, to go into sustainable bundling. That is something that we are now trying to do, bundling experiences with hotels, etc., and bundling sustainable packages that we can push forward, and collaborating with destinations as well. So this will be my definition of success for the future.
Excellent. So GSTC 2025, we still don't know where it will be. Let's arrange another panel. Yeah. We have this recorded, so we'll just compare it. Okay? With that, I would like to thank everyone for the audience for listening and asking great questions. If you have, I see that there are still quite a lot of questions that have not been answered. The people on the stage are still here for the rest of the day. Catch them at the break or at lunch and ask them these questions.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we will now